Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mindfulness Monday, June 13th. I'm so happy to be here with you again today. Oh my goodness, as the days continue on, I know we are way past the 100th day of, I want to stay at home isolation, even though we're starting to venture out into the world in an incremental kind of way. But with every week that passes, it reminds me of the quote by Greek philosopher Heraclitus: the only constant in life is change. We are experiencing so many changes day by day. And just when we thought we were about to go back out into the world and businesses were opening up, and I know how important that is for many, many, even small businesses out there that really need to thrive and survive to open, we've been asked, at least here in Los Angeles, I know it's a little bit different everywhere, but here in Los Angeles, we had to pull back again and sort of, be mindful of how we are getting back out there. So we've had a lot of starts and stops, and we need to be patient. It's a time for us to be patient during a very challenging time. Our patience, of course, is being tested big time, and we're dealing, with a lot of uncertainty during this time. And with all of these changes and living our lives adjusting to what has been called the new normal, and for anybody who's listened prior, I know that this has become a term that is being used, but I think we also have to define what the new normal means to us also. And, with us social distancing and wearing masks that cover practically half of our faces, I don't know about you, but I've actually almost missed two of my friends in the market where I didn't recognize them. These are very dear friends of mine. So keep in mind that our faces are half masked. So sometimes it's a little challenging to be able to really connect with one another. I'm trying hard to connect with my eyes because I can't use the rest of my face to express what I feel towards someone. So again, these are a lot of adjustments that we're having to make. And, one of the questions that I think is on a lot of people's minds during this time is, how does romantic love fit in during a pandemic? I mean, we have never been here before. So we're asking ourselves a lot of questions. And I know for many of you out there, that might be a question that is in the forefront of your mind right now. How does romantic love fit in right now? And what I mean by romantic love, I mean romantic love between husband and wife, romantic love between lovers, and even people that are in search of it and wonder how in the world they can find romantic love during such a challenging time. Well, I can't think of a more perfect person to have this conversation with than my very special guest with me today, Katherine Woodward Thomas. For those of you who don't know who Katherine is, let me tell you a little bit about her. She is a dear special friend and the author of the New York Times bestseller, Conscious Uncoupling: 5 Steps to Living Happily Even After, and the national bestseller, Calling in the One: 7 Weeks to Attract the Love of Your Life. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist and teacher to thousands from all corners of the world in her virtual and in-person learning communities. Katherine is also a featured teacher at Mind Valley, the online transformational educational giant. Katherine also trains, credentials, and supervises people as certified conscious uncoupling coaches and as certified calling in the one coaches, and supports them to develop thriving private practices as love and relationship coaches. Welcome to Mindfulness Monday, Katherine.
Ora, it's so delightful to be with everyone. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. I really am. It's been a while since I've seen you, and I am just treasuring the time that we're going to be together
Me
today.
too.
So There's so much that I want to talk to you about, and as I said, romantic love is definitely on people's minds right now. So, I want to just start with what comes to my mind when I think of these unprecedented times and just the area of love. What came to my mind recently was love in the time of cholera. I thought of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's book, and for anyone that knows that book, that cholera was meant for love is an emotional play. Okay. And he used that as a metaphor for love sickness. But here we are dealing with an actual physical pandemic. And I thought to myself, okay, so how do you address love in the time of COVID-19?
Well, first of all, I think when things like this happen, what gets very clear to us is how much love matters. And I think that for those of us on a growth path, on a spiritual path, sometimes marginalize the need for personal love. We're kind of, I know that this is so for me for many years. I'm kind of a God junkie, as our friend Gabrielle says. But it's Gabrielle Bernstein calls it a God junkie. But, those of us who are fascinated with growth and development sometimes avoid relationship because we don't want anything to lock in a structure where we might have challenges changing and growing. And those of us who have a belief that love is a trap or love is going to somehow take something from me, which is kind of the inner conversation of the love avoidant pattern. We have really prioritized our purpose in life, and we have prioritized our growth in life, which is wonderful. And I think that it's a time like this that reminds us that happy love relationships is not a sideline. It's not a marginalized need, and that we don't actually become ourselves fully unless we are in a relational field that supports us to grow, that we can become more when we're together than we could ever do in isolation. So I think that a lot of people who are experiencing deep loneliness now are acutely aware of how much we actually need each other. And I'm going to include relationship in all of its forms. Love in all of its forms, that the safety life has given us is the safety that we have with each other. That is the safety net that we get, is our love for each other. And so, we think in our culture, which is so materialistically oriented, and we get so overly identified with our possessions, that we somehow seem to think that that's our safety. But it's times like this that remind us that it's not. So what I'm telling everybody I get a chance to is this is a time to forgive. And this is a time to reach out. This is a time to be generous with your love and to begin to dissolve some of the separation that we've built within ourselves when we've had our egos bruised or our feelings hurt. A lot of us will build up walls of resentment, of pushing people away. And now I think we're all called on to be bigger people and to remember the essence of connection and how much it matters. I had a woman yesterday say to me, my mother got mad at me a few months ago. She's not talking to me. And she was crying. She was in a lot of pain. I said, well, I think you need to pick up the phone and say, Mom, people are dying right now. This is not the time. We love each other. I love you. You love me. Stop it. Just
Right.
stop.
Yes.
Right? We need to feel connected to people. One of the things, this is a time of of a lot of silver linings as well. And I say that with all due respect for the suffering. And I'm holding the suffering and present to the suffering as we all are. And at the same time, it's changing dating. It's changing how people are connecting and how they're getting to know each other. I've been saying for years, it's a little awkward sometimes getting to know people and building that emotional intimacy. So a lot of us will just go straight to sex as a substitute for
Right.
emotional connection. We're trying to bond through sex.
Right. Especially now when there's a greater need for that closeness, be it physical, emotional, Do you know that people feel more hungry? Some people might even feel more desperate. Some people might feel more insecure.
A lot of people do. And what this kind of slowdown has almost made it so we're back in the 19th century dating very slowly with our chaperone of Zoom, making sure that we don't touch each other prematurely.
So good, Catherine. That is exactly there. You're in a more of a virtual intimacy, if you will.
Yeah.
Don't have somebody physically with them right now. Do you know?
Well, people are dating. So that's the good news. People are dating and people are falling in love
Mm,
because they're really getting to know each other.
right. I love that.
And
I love that.
yeah,
I think that's a really important point because, the whole notion of what you just said, getting to know one another, the way in which we have needed to slow down, we've got to slow it down. We're living very differently. The way in which we lived before was very hurried. It was all about the doing and not about the being.
well, that's a great point, Nora. And I think what we tend to do in our romantic relationships, particularly when we're looking for love, is we really objectify people
Hmm.
as opposed to relate to people.
Hmm.
Really be present with people. And that's the whole thing about the list. So of course, we all love the list. This is what I want in a mate. He's got to be this, 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 this. She's got to be all that and all this and all that, which is great. Go for it. But, the truth is first of all, until you are being those things, that person's not a match for you. Okay.
Yes, look homeward, people.
Okay, take that list. And now, what are the disciplines you need to do today to be that list? That's, of course, the first place you want to look. But the second part is you could meet somebody with all of those characteristics, but if the connection isn't present, so the list you want to be making is, well, what do I want to be feeling? What do I want to be creating with this person, experiencing in this relationship? How do I want to feel?
Mhm.
How do and then that's where you can become a co-creator of that future. Because if you start to say, well, what do I want to be creating? I'd love to plant a garden. I'd love to create a beautiful home. I'd love to create a family. Well, you can go out and, buy seeds today. And even if you have a little apartment, you get some soil and you get some seeds or you clear out the clutter from your home, or you reach out to your sister's kids and you want to do a Zoom call with them so you have more family. Like you get to be a co-creator of that future.
Absolutely. There are things that people are actually trying out for the first time, which is so beautiful because they have so much more time not to be running out from pillar to post. I believe this is a time of personal transformation. I think it's a great opportunity to look within. I think it's a great opportunity to find out who we are and try things that maybe perhaps we've never done. There's more gardening going on. There's more baking going on. There people are trying things that they have never done before, which is so beautiful. But specifically in the area of dating, I just want to circle back to that point. As I know you do, I work with a lot of millennials, and I became very familiar with the dating site type of reality, if you will, which isn't just necessarily the way in which young people date. But I think that the model for that has been that for young people specifically, that there's all this availability all the time, whenever, however. And I love what you said about going back to more of a type of mindfulness in the way we're getting to know each other for those that are single. And by the way, even for those that are in relationship, getting to know each other differently for the first time. Do you know, whether you're in a relationship or in seek of a relationship, we're getting to know one another in new ways. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, well, I think this has been a real make it or break it time for couples.
Oh, yes. Do you know,
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that because I am seeing more divorces. Now, talk about that, Catherine, because there seems to be a spike in divorce. And I don't know if that's because familiarity breeds contempt, because you're locked in a space together. And for people that are in marriages and relationship with maybe they're used to their partner traveling or being on location or not being at home all the time. There must be reasons why there is a spike in the separation or hopefully conscious uncoupling to your book. but there is a spike. I've noticed that, or people are becoming closer. So how do you address the fact that it's really under the microscope of people who are maybe either noticing that things aren't working, there were problems there prior, or there are new problems because people are more at stay-at-home isolation together?
All of the above. All of the above. The pressures of this time financially on many people, the pressures in co-raising children. But I think it is the things that have been kind of swept under the carpet and easily avoided cannot be avoided right now. I think for all of us, Ora, what this time is doing is really forcing us to grow in the ways that we haven't. I mean, the whole thing about, where we are culturally, even outside of the pandemic, just in terms of romantic love, is that we really have gone in the last 50 or 60 years from a role-based relationship to a soul-based relationship.
Mm.
I always remind people that, hey, your grandmother, when she was looking for a husband, she just wanted to make sure the guy didn't drink too much, he had a job, and he smelled good. Like, that was her criteria.
I love when you say that. It's a good reminder to tell people from whence they came,
Okay, so we have all of this, wonderful, juicy, desire now for a spiritual equal and a financial equal, or someone who's even more secure financially than us, somebody who's brilliant and fit and, eats consciously and meditates. I mean, our list goes on of what we not just want, but even have come to expect. But the very first line of the Calling in the One book is this: the reason that many of us do not yet have the relationship that we desire is because we have not yet become the people we would need to be in order to create and then sustain that kind of relationship. So the desire that we have is pushing us to grow. And we are the generation that is given the task of growing our consciousness, growing our self-awareness, beginning to command our consciousness. You work in the area of thoughts. That means getting clear about your thoughts, getting clear about your assumptions. Who is the I in I love you? Which I is speaking? Is it the 4-year-old wounded I? Because if that's the I you're trying to scratch the itch from, that is a doomed project. There is nothing the other person can ever do to scratch that itch. So in order to have a conscious relationship of equals, and I've been learning now, because I'm a lifelong learner, as we all are, and I've been learning from a wonderful woman named Polly Young Eisendrath, who wrote a book called Love Between Equals. And what Polly is pointing to is that never before in the history of intimate love that we can see, that in our roster, recorded history, has there been love between equals. We've always had hierarchical love. And if you look back at like the model of the 50s or the 60s, it seems so old-fashioned and kind of comforting in a weird way. But, basically, that was also the feeding ground for Betty Friedan, the problem with no name, where women were out of their mind. Or if you go all the way back to Freud's days, where women never had an opinion and could never be, seen or heard. And he labeled women as having this phenomenon of hysteria. Like, women, there is a hierarchy in place.
Yes.
And only one person got to really be in that relationship, and the other person had to kind of be in their shadow.
Right.
And serve the one person. So this is no small matter that we're going to now love between equals. And the truth is that we have a lot of self-deception, and we're not really clear on our motives or unwholesome motives, and that we human beings, for whatever reason, go into a place where we feel like we're being threatened by people. So suddenly it's very easy for our intimate partner, because we're so vulnerable with that person, to suddenly become the enemy. And if we don't know how to work with our own consciousness, if we don't know how to examine our thoughts, our assumptions, where we're centered when we're speaking, if we get into the trap of trying to be right or trying to be understood more than understand, trying to be right more than making space for both of us to be right. I mean, the truth is about human experience is that it's extremely subjective, and our experience can be very different than our partner's experience. Wild gap, irreconcilable gap. Your mother hasn't visited in a year. Are you serious? She was here last weekend. What are you thinking? Like the like the gap is big. Yeah. So, and if you get stuck in, well, there's only one truth here and we're going to get to it, that's not going to go well.
No, that doesn't seem to work. This really brings to mind, Katherine, as a mindfulness practitioner, I said to someone recently, it's very important for us to ask ourselves the question, what do I want from myself? And also to be aware of what is it that I want from you, the other, in relationship, do you know? And it really brings to mind that with what you're saying, in that I think we have so much to learn about what our expectations are of each other. And that's a mindful awareness. Someone said to me, oh, Ora, it's so much work to be self-aware all the time. Imagine self-aware of oneself, but self-aware of who I am in relationship to other. Do you know? I mean, it is a moment by moment awareness. And, it's work. We know that in relationships. And I want to just, bring that to the foreground about this awareness of who we are with another, what, aside from, or in addition to, I should say, to the roles that have been defined from long ago, to your point of that, there's already projections, there's already expectations. There, two people can go into a relationship, and some of these mindsets are from long ago, to your point again, in the way in which perhaps women are viewed by men, in the way men are viewed by women. Having the awareness of, how do I see you? How do I perceive you? What is it that I want from you? What is it that I want from you? For me personally, that is a constant awareness of what it is that I ask of myself and what is it that I ask of another.
Well, that's beautiful. And I think, Ora, we have different conflicting wants.
Yes, exactly right. And what do we do with all those conflicting wants?
Well, and it's recognizing that there's parts of us that we formed inside of a fantasy. We want to be rescued. We want to be taken care of. But then we don't want anyone telling us what to do, and we want to be independent. We have a lot of conflicting wants. And so I always like to look at the big picture, like, where are we from an evolutionary perspective? And this quality of being able to be extremely self-aware, not just of our thoughts, not just of our emotions, of our assumptions, of our expectations, but also of what we're projecting, what we're disowning in that moment and projecting onto the other person. So but if we can contextualize this high level of self-awareness as an emergent quality from an evolutionary perspective, and if you go back and look at the movies of the 30s and 40s, they lacked a certain complexity. It was like, oh, I love you, darling. I love you too, darling. Let's get married. And then they do, and they're happy. Like that, period, the end.
And that's why it was the movies.
But it's reflective of culture, because if you look at movies even now in our day and age, you've got all sorts of conflicting emotions and issues that you're working out and stuff that's going on in the subtext and the parents and the grandparents, just to show This Is Us, which, you're seeing all the lineage of time, and, it's wonderful what's happening, but you see the complexity. So we're in an age where what life is up to is greater levels of consciousness. That is the work of our time. Just like, at 150 years ago, the work of the time was to actually get from, build pathways from the east coast of America to the west coast of America. And that meant machetes chopping down things, and that meant laying railroad tracks down. Like that was hard work. That was hard work. But now look, we just go from one coast to the other like it's nothing.
Right.
Like it's a lunch date. Okay, so if we look from an evolutionary perspective, the hard work of our generation, our contribution to future generations, is this level of self-awareness, this interiority that we're called to cultivate, so that future generations can just wake up and know, oh, that's just a thought. That's not real. Here, this is more real. Let me live from that thought.
Absolutely.
What can I create from that thought? Just like when your grandkids are 7, playing with each other. No, that's not true. Here, how about try this thought on? Right. Oh, okay, good. That's what happens in consciousness, because consciousness is relational. Right. And we're actually building our it's a difficult task that we've been given, because now we're conscious enough to know how miserable we are.
Ooh, so true. Let's not hurry that one by, shall we? Let's park ourselves there for a minute, Katherine. Waking up to a lot of this, big spoonfuls of reality right now. Big spoonfuls of reality. We're waking up to so much right now.
Oh my gosh. Well, even, I don't know about you, but I know I'm reading a lot of books about racial bias and all sorts of things, just to become more conscious. And I'm one of those people, who always thought I'm not like anyone who's racist. But, there are people of color who are saying, well, actually, the liberal white folks, you've got things to look at too. So I'm like, okay, I'm listening to Layla Assad. Right. I'm listening to her wonderful book, White Supremacy in Me, right? So just wonderful. And, just getting conscious, becoming aware. It's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable in the context of the racial healing that's needing to happen now. And it's uncomfortable in a relationship with your partner, where you say, wow, I really that's kind of ugly, but I just really want to dominate you right now. I don't frankly care about what you're feeling and needing. That's actually the truth.
There is so much for us to be conscious about. I say we really need to be on our toes right now. We are being asked to wake up in so many ways. This is a game changer. I really feel it's a game changer because it's in areas across the board. Sometimes people can only take in one area of change, and we know that change is not comfortable for most people to begin with. We have been thrown into the deep waters of change. You're talking about racism, you're talking about, a global pandemic in which we have to define what it means to get to know ourselves better. We have been forced to go within. That's terribly uncomfortable for a lot of people. And who knows what today is going to bring on top of that. So I feel that right now, we are being asked to become more awake, more conscious in probably every area imaginable.
I agree. And I want to give everybody something, Ora, right now, that I think is very important. Because of this, what we're called to do is a lot of self-reflection. And when you say that people don't want to go there, I want to distinguish why somebody wouldn't want to go there, and the difference between disempowering self-reflection and empowered self-reflection. So most of us, when we initially try and take personal responsibility for something, we're going to take the finger and point it back to ourselves. Okay, how am I a space for this? How might I have set someone up for this? What was my part? How did I collude in this in a covert way? I always like to say, because we get so adamant that it's other people, I always like to say, okay, 97% it's the other person's fault. Be really interested in your 3%.
Okay. Your book, I love that percentage reality. so easy. It's all about them. Oh, it must
You
be.
have to change.
Yeah.
Okay. Be really interested in your 3%. It's a very popular thing to diagnose other people now with borderline or narcissistic personality disorder. But here's the thing. If you're with someone who has a narcissistic personality, that means you're a co-narcissist.
Oh my gosh, Catherine, you're throwing out these major pearl bombs right now. That is another one we're gonna hi people. We're gonna
Okay.
because that's amazing to have said that. This has been what has it been, the year, the decade, the zeitgeist of the narcissist, where it's, in the context that I have been hearing it said from people is that they're with a narcissist. They have been with a narcissist, and I haven't heard it said that way. How about the responsibility that we need to take for our participation in the dynamics that we have chosen to be in? And I'm not talking about victimhood here. I'm not talking about that, nor am I talking about, because the beautiful word that we love to subscribe to is forgiveness. But the way in which you just said that, I think this is about owning and taking responsibility. And I think that's really important to talk about too. And I haven't heard someone say that as you have said just now.
Thank you.
Let's spend a little bit of time on that, because I think that's rather eye-opening.
Great. And let's tie it in with this, disempowered self-reflection versus empowered self-reflection. Because so basically, if you're with someone who's narcissistic, you're in a lot of pain because you're not getting your needs met, and it's kind of sucking the life out of you. And so, of course, the first place to go is, what is wrong with that person? What's wrong with that person? And we can get very, focused on what's wrong with that person. The moment we go to say, to take responsibility, what we might do, Ora, is go, well, what's wrong with me? Which is a very shame-based question. And inside of that, we'll go to a place of victimization. Like, either I'm really screwed up, or I don't love myself, or my mother screwed me up, my father screwed me up. So any kind of blame, shame, victimized conversation, the growth that happens in that conversation is zero. Zero. Because shame stunts development. There's no growth in a shame-based conversation. So when we're talking about self-reflection, people don't like it because they get flooded with shame and self-loathing, and they don't want to go there. So the alternative, what we're looking for, is a growth-oriented question that has nothing to do with what's wrong with me, and has a very large space for your humanity and the humanity of all of us right now. So it might be questions like, well, how am I giving my power to this person, this narcissist? And what's motivating me to do that? Well, what am I getting out of being with someone who's larger than life? Well, I don't have to be responsible for any decisions, because they're not going to make them with me. They're going to make all the decisions. But the good news for me is I haven't been responsible for anything. I've wanted someone to just kind of take care of me. Or I source my safety from being a people pleaser. Or I don't even know what I'm feeling and needing, let alone be able to express my feelings and needs to another person. But then I don't express my feelings and needs inside of the thought that that person wouldn't care. So I don't even give them a chance to care. I just resent them for not caring. But I haven't even told them what I feel and need. See, until you engage this conversation with a certain objectivity and maturity to really see what's happening that you are responsible for, nothing's going to change. Some people that we say are narcissistic are actually quite trainable. If we change our dance steps, they will change theirs.
And that's, and certainly, I'm not an expert on narcissists, and I don't believe I have any of them in my life, thank God. haven't had to play that one out. That people really, a lot that has been assumed or presumed about it, that it is an impenetrable personality type that is impossible to change. Now, you're hearing that mostly, I think, from people that have experienced a narcissist, been involved in a narcissist, or perhaps written about narcissists. Now, I haven't read really books on it because I haven't had the desire to. But you're bringing up, I think, in the area of something that is so important, because this goes into, Katherine, areas of where people feel helpless and hopeless, and they are, again, this is not questioning, this isn't the reflecting, this isn't the mindful awareness of the way in which this person is talking to me right now is unacceptable. Why am I allowing for that? You're everything to me is question based, personally, to be aware of not only the thoughts that we tell ourselves, but the thoughts that we're thinking when somebody is speaking to us, in whichever way they're speaking to us. So there's a lot for people to understand about what they're allowing for, what they're accepting, and what they're colluding with.
Yeah. So in calling in the one and conscious uncoupling both, it's really looking at how am I the source of this, with a certain sense of ownership. And just really being much more interested in that, because either what's going to happen is you're going to graduate from your co-narcissist dance or your co-borderline or whatever the dynamic is that you're dealing with. You're going to graduate from that, and either suddenly the other person will start to show up differently, or the relationship will no longer be suitable for you because you've become a healthier version of yourself. And then that's what conscious uncoupling is about. Well, how to have that end well so that you're actually complete with that person and not just separating like a bomb went off and then you are both kind of bleeding out.
Right. This is this goes into an area that I think is I don't want to say delicate, but I think it's going to be very mixed with a lot of people's feelings towards it, and that is victimhood. Do you know? And I'd love to know what what your take on that is, because for anyone that's been in a relationship, I just recently had a Mindfulness Monday with Jill Sorensen, who's the co-founder of Knockout Abuse, and we took a deep dive into domestic violence. Victimhood across the board. There's a lot of things to talk about. It's a very loaded conversation that has a lot of layers to it. And so I wanted to know what your thoughts, since we've gone in this direction, about people that find themselves in relationships. I mean, I'd love nothing more than to have this entire hour be about love, divine love. We can go into all aspects of love, and I hope we can cover that as well before our hour is over here today. But that the area of where people find themselves in relationships that have been very painful for them, and or even destructive to themselves, destructive with another. How do you address that in the area? Because you're talking specifically to the narcissist personality type and those that have been involved with one. That I'm hearing from you that this is about taking responsibility and ownership, which are maybe areas in which people need to get better at, or to learn the skills of how to become better at that.
Well, so first of all, I'm in the realm of what would disappear this pattern. So I'm not in the realm of what's right and wrong. That's a very important thing. So I think it's very important to validate the victimization where victimization has happened. And we're talking about narcissism, so there is a spectrum. And there are people on the spectrum who are so hard and fast, and they are not going to change, mostly because they're not willing to self-reflect in this empowered way. If they do try and self-reflect, they go into such shame that they don't self-reflect, which means they don't take ownership. Mm-hmm. So I think of the actual sign of mental health is the ability to self-reflect. That to me is the measure of mental health. And sometimes people will come to me to work with me, and I won't take them on because my work requires such a high level of self-responsibility. And if people don't have an interest in taking personal responsibility, I'm not a good fit for them. So, but I think it's very important to state several things. One is we are never responsible for what happened to us as children, for the bad behavior, the hurtful behavior of adults. And so I'm not talking about when we talk about how did you draw that experience in, absolutely no. There is such a thing as being victimized. There also is such a thing as being victimized in an adult relationship. Somebody steals your money, somebody cheats on you, somebody lies, somebody, lashes out, somebody physically attacks you, somebody rapes you. Like those are things you're not responsible for either. You are never responsible for the bad behavior of other people. What we're talking about, Ora, is how do we evolve beyond the toxic residue and patterns that then result from those traumas. So certainly, for example, if somebody was ill-treated as a child, they had a narcissistic mother who disappeared them. And basically the consciousness that will often form in response to having a narcissistic mother is I'm not good enough in some way. So there's like a lifelong inferiority and putting oneself down and putting others on pedestals and disappearing oneself because of a lack of confidence. So a lot of times when we're saying, I can't forgive my parents, I'm trying to forgive them because I'm a spiritual person and I know I need to, I want to, but I keep coming back to my rage. It's not because of what happened 30 years ago, it's what happened 30 minutes ago when you were in a room full of people. And again, you disappeared yourself or you showed up as less than who you are. And so it's the residue that we live with. So that's what I'm saying we need to be responsible for. So whatever happened to us as children, we're not responsible for, but we are responsible for how we are now perpetuating that experience of being less than other people. And of course, those of us who get into narcissistic dynamics, which I have a whole history of myself, really due to having a very narcissistic mother. So this, I'm talking from personal experience now. I know this one really well. And but the only way that I'm going to ever graduate from that pattern is not by being frustrated with my mother, not by looking at the past. Where I like to begin in my work is with the future. And I'm a therapist, so it's a little radical to say that. How would I like it to be? Well, and what can I commit to? What's the future that's unpredictable? That's probably not going to happen unless I stand for it. Well, the future is that I am an equal with the women I most admire. Okay, in this incident, I'm thinking of just in this, or I am in an equal partnership with a partner who sees me, gets me as I see them and get them. And we are co-creating our relationship. We are with and for each other. We stay on the inside and we are each other's best friend and cheerleader. And that's that's the relationship I'm standing for. So now I have a gap, but I have a vision that's going to pull me into the development to become that person, because the game isn't now suddenly manifesting that, it's becoming who I need to be in order to meet that date with destiny, to be in that room with my peers and feel, equal and worthy of that, not like a false confidence, but like an authentic confidence. Like what would need to happen for that experience to be my new norm? So now I'm looking at, okay, so how have I been setting other people up to think that they're better than me? How have I been underpresenting myself? How have I been not giving myself the development that I would need in order to know what I'm talking about when I'm with my peers? Right? There's all sorts of things that in the old story I do or I don't do that perpetuates that story. So that's what I'm looking for when I say self-responsibility and non-victimization. So I don't even have to resolve the fact, was I a victim? Did that person do something horrible? I just start from probably, Yes. Like if you're pissed at somebody, it's because somebody violated your rights. Let's just say yes. But the truth is I don't want to ever have this happen again. That's where my focus is.
Right. And
So
one
I want to,
that learns that.
and
You got
also to
that.
complete that relationship so I don't have to hate that person forever. If you start to really look at how you covertly gave your power away because you didn't really want to be responsible for yourself, or you didn't actually believe in yourself, or you were too lazy to have created it any other way, like you really tell the truth about that, you might even start to feel like, oh gosh, I just set them up to be the worst of who they are. And I feel bad about that on a soul level.
Right.
I better not do that again. I can't really go back and undo that. But I can make sure I don't do that to someone else in the future.
And those are the types of, the aha moments that we get sometimes when we have some distance from something. And I love the way you talk about, I, as a mindfulness teacher, I'm all about the present, living in the present, but also planning for a more mindful future. So I'm there with you. Not lamenting a past that is come and gone, a time frame that no longer exists, but looking towards a future possibility of who I am and who I'm becoming. I think is a beautiful thought to hold in one's mind's eye. I love that. What do you say to people, Katherine? Because as I had thought, our hour is going to fly by. For those people that really are wanting a more conscious relationship, who are maybe not having it now, they're not in one. Let's speak to those that perhaps, well, maybe we could speak to both people that are in relationships and evolving it more consciously. I'm all for that. I love the idea of evolving my relationship with my partner, Jeff, and that is a conscious desire, and it's a conscious practice, if you will. For those that are now really wanting to call in the one, to talk specifically about your gorgeous book that is just so wonderful.
Thank you, which I just rewrote. I just handed the second version into the publisher last week.
Oh, you mean it's going to be better than
yeah, because I wrote it in 2004 and it was feeling a little dated, and so I thought, well, let me just change some things. And then once I got in there, of course, I ended up rewriting a third of the book. But
oh boy, get ready, people! You got a good one coming your way. So give us some of these wonderful little pearls that for those that are saying, you know what, yeah, I want to call in the one. Yeah, I'm ready to call in the one. And I have done, some, if not all, the things that Katherine has talked about today, and focused on the inner me and who I want to become, as opposed to just wanting someone to fill that for me. Fill the void. No, you fill the void. Whatever void you think you need to fill. What would you say to them today, Katherine? And put it in the framework, if you will, of the times that we're in, because they are quite different. What would you say to anybody who is wanting to imagine themselves with a partner that really is someone that they are able to imagine that partner from today, because who they are today is very different?
Oh, it's beautiful. I love how you even embodied that when you were asking the question. It's lovely. We do start with the vision of the future, the future. And I'll tell you, it's hard for people sometimes who've had a lot of dysfunction in relationship. And I think that, early childhood woundings does set us up to have difficulties moving forward and creating good relationships that are healthy and solid, and a place from which one can really launch the best of who you are in the world. So sometimes people have an overwhelming sense of resignation. Even possibility thinkers, even very advanced spiritual practitioners might feel resigned in this particular area.
Absolutely.
So one of the places that I really begin is I help people to number one, see the pattern, really name the pattern that you're in. And the pattern is going to be something like, I'm alone for long periods of time. And then when I do get into a relationship, I tend to lose myself in that relationship, and then I eventually leave because I can't be myself there. So that would be a pattern. Or my pattern is to become involved with very narcissistic people, or my pattern is to be with people who cheat, or there's some kind of through line. So we're looking for the pattern. And you want to begin by asking yourself, how am I the source of that pattern? So the moment you start to look at, how you're the source, and you start to play with that question, not from, again, a place of shame, but from an objective place, like, well, how does it work for me to be on my own? What's the part of me that doesn't want a relationship? Um, what are the agreements that I've had along the way with other people that mattered to me, including myself, that might prevent love from taking root? So, for example, the promise to never let yourself get hurt like that again,
Mm, mhm.
or the vow that you made to a former love that that one person was it for you. That was the love of your life. And that there's this part of you that's still holding out hope that maybe they'll come back to you, or it would feel disloyal because you've given your word. I met with one woman once who had been divorced for 10 years. Lovely woman in her early 40s, a saleswoman, so she had a very kind of bubbly, outgoing personality, extremely successful, very feminine, very pretty. I just and came to me like, why has no one asked me out on a date in 10 years? And I have to say, I was really baffled until we discovered that this piece about agreements is that she had been keeping her agreement to God to only ever sleep with her husband, sexual fidelity to her husband. Now, again, they'd been divorced for 10 years. He was already married to someone else and had a child. She hadn't spoken to him in 10 years, but she got married. She was Catholic, and she got married in the Catholic Church. And there
Mm,
was a part, so when she was going around, she was walking around like she had a married vibe, right? Like married women don't really get asked out. If you're really faithful, you're in that relationship. She had no signal that she was single and available. So what we did is we had her pray
mhm.
and just renegotiate that agreement with God and complete that agreement. Isn't that interesting? And then of course she started getting asked out.
Wow, that's deep in that that was deep within her without even having an awareness of it, that she could come to you and ask the question, why isn't anybody asking me out? Do you know,
Yeah.
we sometimes don't know how deep our core beliefs are, how deep they are tucked deep within, do you know? And then we wonder why the outer manifestation is not meeting our deep desires, because it's in conflict with our deep core beliefs that might not even be known to us.
Right. So we're looking for the parts of us that are internally incongruent with the
Right,
desire that you have for love,
right,
recognizing how powerful we are,
right,
that we
exactly.
really are incredibly powerful. And if there's a part of us that doesn't really trust ourselves to not give ourselves away, that we might have a wall up that's energetic and kind of either choosing people who we know we're never going to really be with because they're impossible loves to begin with,
Right.
or just signaling that we're not quite available. So we're looking in calling in the one. The whole first part of calling in the one is this deep awareness of ourselves as the source of our experience outside of shame,
Mm,
outside of self-blame, but just personal responsibility and the recognition of how powerful we are. Of course, we get very quickly into core beliefs that inside of, the relational wounding I had as a child, I formed a certain identity of I'm alone or I'm not valuable. And inside of that core sense of self, I will show up in ways that perpetuate a pattern that mirrors that back to me.
that self-fulfilled prophecy. We are winding down here to just a couple more minutes. Catherine, how about leaving people with um, the transformation of fear? For anyone who has fear in their hearts, towards love right now, whatever expression of love that is. What can you tell them about transforming fear?
Great. That's great. Fear, well, fear is the crux of both the love avoidant pattern and the love anxious pattern. So the fear and the love avoidant pattern is love is dangerous, not safe to let anyone too close. And it's going marriage is a trap, or it's going to take something from me. And the fear in the love anxious pattern is the insecure attachment would be that other people are going to leave me. I'm afraid that people are going to leave me. So usually, if you really notice where those fears are in your body, you can talk to that part of yourself and you can say, sweetheart, how old are you? And it's always going to be a younger self and a traumatized self. So we have to, a lot of my work these days is developing the relationship between the cognitive, mindful, advanced, developed, wise, adult, mature self and that younger self. Now, I will say that it's not just a matter of correcting that. No, you are safe to love. What it points to is actually missing development. Is it safe to cross the street? Well, not if you know how to look left and right, then it's safe to cross the street. But if you don't, then it's not. So then you can ask yourself the question, what would I need to develop to have it be safe? And I'll leave it there because you can see that's a whole nother hour right
Yes.
there.
Yes, it is. My goodness, this has flown by, and I have loved talking to you. There are so many more things that I wanted to ask you, and we will continue the conversation at another time. For anyone who wants to get connected to you, know more about you, where can they go?
Well, you can go to KatherineWoodwardThomas.com, and I will say that in 2 weeks, we do have a 3-day event calling in the one workshop, a virtual workshop.
Beautiful. So how do they get to know that?
That is right on the homepage of KatherineWoodwardThomas.com, or you can go to callingintheonecourse.com. And it's 50% off now for COVID, just because we know that times are tough for people.
Wonderful. Katherine, I have loved seeing you virtually. I wish I could just, see you for tea again, and I hope that day comes soon. It has been a sheer delight to have you here with us today. For all of you listeners out there and anybody who's been a part with us today watching my conversation with Katherine Woodward Thomas, I hope that you got a lot of insight out of this conversation that we had. For more, I encourage you, pick up Katherine's books, Conscious Uncoupling, and Calling in the One, which is going to be new and improved. Hard for me to believe that because it's so darn good as is. What a gift that we're going to get even more beautiful tips and wisdom in there. So again, thank you all for joining us today. From my heart to yours, until we meet again.